Boldwood presents #NoFilter, written by Maxine Morrey and read by Olivia Beardsley. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. That's it. I am totally going to jail. I'm going to get it wrong, owe thousands, not be able to pay, and go to jail. I flung myself backwards with an overly dramatic sigh, and lay sprawled on the paperwork I had been looking at. And seriously, me in an orange jumpsuit? I don't care how on-trend they are, I could never pull that off. Orange is so not my colour. Amy topped up her wine glass before reaching a hand down to grab my arm, tugging me in the direction of the sofa. I slid along the floor for a few moments in my prone position, like some sort of beached four-legged starfish, until I eventually bumped into the furniture. "I think that's more America, hun," she said, yanking me upwards. "I'm not sure what ours are like. Something much more subtle, I expect. And don't worry, I'll hide a file inside the first cake I bring you. You'll be out in no time." I paused in my clambering from the floor onto the sofa, and gave her a look. She made a sawing motion with one hand, accompanied by an over-exaggerated wink as she held out my wine glass. Flopping onto the couch, I took the glass and swigged a large mouthful before laying my head back onto the soft cushions. Seriously, though, I really don't know what I'm doing with this. I thought I was handling all this business stuff okay until now. "And you are," Amy interjected. "Your blog is doing amazingly well. I can't believe the difference in a year. It's incredible. Seriously, Libs, you should really be proud of yourself." I sighed. "Thanks, Ames. And I am. And of Tilly. I couldn't have done it without her. But I'm so frustrated. I've taken on this insane learning curve and, for the most part, got the hang of things, I think. But this..." I kicked a piece of paper with my bare toes. "This I just cannot get my head round. Why does tax have to be so bloody complicated? They send you this stuff so that you are supposedly able to do it yourself, but write it in the most confusing language possible. How is that even remotely helpful?" Amy just shook her head and took another sip of wine. "So, what are you going to do?" "I don't know. I guess I need to start looking for an accountant." I twiddled the wine glass stem in my hand. Amy leant over and bumped her head gently on my shoulder. "You know, it is okay to ask people for help sometimes. We can't all be amazing at everything. Creating all this in such a short space of time is brilliant, Libby. Finding that you need some extra expertise in one area is perfectly acceptable and perfectly normal." "I guess." I put the glass down. "Before I forget, I have something for you." Immediately, Amy sat up straighter in anticipation, and her eyes watched me as I crossed to the other side of the room and picked up a small but fancy cardboard bag with intricately twisted rope handles and a swirly script logo on the side. Walking back over to the sofa, I plopped the bag down on Amy's lap. "Did I ever tell you that going for it with this lifestyle blog business is the best thing that you've ever done?" I laughed. "You just like the freebies." "True," Amy agreed, before letting out an ooh of pleasure at the eyeshadow palette and perfume she'd just pulled out of the bag. "But thanks anyway." "Any time." "Oh!" Amy's eyes shone, like those of a child who'd just won past the parcel. "Really? I can have this?" Without waiting for confirmation, Amy began excitedly spritzing the exclusive new perfume copiously on pretty much every pulse point she could reach, including mine. Laughing, I lifted my wrist up to take another waft of the fragrance. It really was gorgeous. I smiled as my friend rummaged in the bag, unwrapping the various goodies from their pretty tissue paper packaging. The cosmetic companies often sent more samples than I could possibly use, so I always made sure my assistant got some to review and regularly ran giveaways on the blog as a thank you to my readers. But occasionally, I still had extra goodies left over. Amy always loved a good freebie, so when I had something spare, it meant I got to make my best friend happy. As the fumes of Amy's fragrance enthusiasm began getting a little pungent, I pushed myself up and padded over to the doors that led out onto the balcony. Grabbing the handle, I slid the door to the side. Immediately, a warm breeze rushed in from the sea, dissipating the perfume and bringing with it the screech of seagulls intertwined with chatter and laughter from the nearby bars and restaurants in the marina. I stepped out, grabbing a wide-brimmed, slightly battered straw hat off the nearby console table, and took a seat on one of the 2 wooden steamer chairs that resided on my balcony. Amy followed me out, wine glass in hand, the gift bag now swinging off her wrist. If I was honest, the furniture was a squeeze, and a trendy little bistro set would have been a better, more sensible option. I'd made the classic mistake of guesstimating that they would fit perfectly on the balcony. They didn't, and I'd ended up building them in situ like some sort of furniture Jenga, which had proved to be the only way of getting them both to fit on there. But I loved them. I didn't want a trendy little bistro set. The loungers were super comfy with full-length padded cushions and reclined just enough without touching the glass. I could sit out here and read in comfort, watching the boats sway and bob gently in the marina, listening as the sound of waves bumping against the harbour wall carried across the water. Even in winter, when the wind howled and the sea reared up before crashing down forcefully onto the nearby beach, I would happily sit out here, wrapped up against the cold, just absorbing it all. There was definitely no need for coats and scarves this evening. It seemed that spring had decisively handed off the baton early to summer, and the new season was away and running. The evening was warm, and the breeze soft, as Amy and I, now having inelegantly climbed onto our respective lounges, sat back and sighed happily. "Thanks for all this, Libs." "You're very welcome," I replied, forgetting my worries for a while, and with a smile on my face, I closed my eyes, soaking up the atmosphere as the gentle warmth of the setting sun caressed our skin. Closing the Twitter app, I leaned over, grabbed my handbag, and proceeded to tip the contents out onto my desk. Tilly, my part-time assistant, looked up from where she'd been leafing through the latest issue of Vogue that had dropped through the door this morning. She raised an eyebrow in question. "Apparently it's National What's in Your Handbag Day. I thought we could join in," I replied, poking the pile of stuff now in front of me. "We?" "Yes," I paused, looking over at her. "Why not? You haven't got a loaded weapon in there, have you? Or half a kilo of cocaine?" "No, of course not." "I'm joking, Tills. You just looked decidedly shifty when I mentioned it. It's fine if you don't want to do it, anyway. It's not compulsory. I grinned, before turning my attention back to the contents of my bag. A tampon sat proudly in the middle of the pile. I chewed my lip for a moment, and then snagged the item out and put it to the side. I noticed Tilly watching me. "So, we can edit what's in there?" she asked. I raised a brow. I don't think the world needs to see my emergency sanitary items. There's sharing and there's oversharing. Tilly waited a beat before grabbing her own bag and turning it upside down on her own desk. "Holy crap, Tills!" I laughed. "How do you even carry all that without tipping over?" "I keep meaning to clear it out and never seem to get around to it." "Apparently. Well, why don't you take this as an opportunity? Sort out what you want in there, and then we can just post the after rather than the before." Tilly pulled a face. "I'm not sure you should be paying me for sorting out my handbag." I waved her protest away. A grin slipped onto Tilly's face. "Okay." For the next 20 minutes, there were several exclamations of the "Bloody hell, I've been looking for that forever," and "Oh, I wondered where that had gone" variety. By the time she had finished, Tilly's bag was about half a ton lighter, and the nearby waste paper basket was overflowing. Artfully arranging each pile to look specifically unartfully arranged, but in a pleasing manner, we moved the lights over to the desk and photographed each one. The contents in sharp focus with the handbags themselves slightly out of focus in the background. Tilly emailed me her copy for the post, listing the items her bag now contained and their significance, if any, which I then added to my own piece, before quickly typing an introduction about the hashtag. Finally, I copied and pasted a bunch of hashtags we commonly used for blog posts and added the hashtag "What's in my handbag" tag to the bottom. With the photos loaded, I ran the spell checker, then gave the text a final scan as a triple check. Satisfied that there were no errors, I pressed submit, and the post went live on my Brighton Belle lifestyle blog. "Do you still want to try that photo shoot on the beach tomorrow morning? I've just checked the weather, and it's looking good." Tilly and I were scanning the list of planned blog posts we'd compiled for the next few weeks. These were flexible to a degree, which allowed us to comment on any hot, relevant topic that came up. But planning was an essential part of running the blog. It didn't tally too well with the glamorous ideas that some people had of what I did for a living, but it was most definitely a necessary part. Like a lot of jobs that people only saw a small part of, there was a much bigger, far more mundane part to it. "Ideally," I nodded as I scanned my calendar, "so long as you don't mind coming over early. I can get everything ready and packed in the car so that we can just go straight there and hopefully catch some good light, as well as beating the crowds." "Fine with me. I think it'll be fun. We've always stayed around the marina for pictures before, so I think it's good to try and incorporate some more of Brighton into the shoots. And who doesn't like the beach?" "Great, thanks, Tilly. Hopefully it'll all go well. With a bit of luck, we might even find we're naturals at this whole on-location photo shoot thing." We most definitely weren't naturals. I heard the wave first, and then I saw it. Briefly. Very briefly. It was, in fact, just long enough for me to open my mouth, ostensibly to make some sort of noise signifying surprise, but in actuality it just ensured that I swallowed what felt like a third of the English Channel before the force of the water overtook me and unceremoniously washed me up onto the beach like some bit of old shipwreck detritus. Opening my mouth had definitely been a bad move. "Libby!" Tilly's panicked voice came to me through the gurgly water sounds now filling my ears. Spitting out seawater, and goodness knew what else, I quickly stood, the shock of the cold water propelling me to move. Pushing my hair back from my face, I made to step forward, inelegantly wobbling on the uneven pebbles. The next wave crashed into the back of my legs, and, unbalanced, I took another tumble. Thinking that a gradual ascent to standing might be more successful, I pushed myself up onto my hands and knees. From the corner of my eye, I saw a nearby windsurfer out for an early morning sail fall head first off his board. At least I wasn't the only one taking an unexpected dip, although, admittedly, he was more suitably dressed for the water than I was. The pebbles of Brighton Beach dug into my knees, and I made ouchy noises as I got myself fully upright once more. "Are you all right?" My assistant had now made her way to me and was staring. I could only imagine what I looked like, but I did know it certainly wasn't the look we'd had in mind for this photo shoot. "You have, Tilly hesitantly pointed at my head. I looked back, blankly. "What?" "In your hair." "What? What's in my hair?" My voice kicked up an octave. I didn't especially want to know what was in my hair, but neither did I want what was in my hair to remain there. I put my hand up warily and felt around. Nothing. "Can you get it?" Tilly shook her head. I can't touch it." "What? You can't touch what? Where is it?" Visions of hideous things crawling about on my head now filled my mind. I bent over and shook my head, but nothing obvious plopped out on the beach. I looked back at Tilly, hopeful. She shook her head, then took a picture. "What are you doing?" I squeaked in horror. Tilly turned the camera and showed me the screen. Nope. Definitely not the look we'd been aiming for to showcase these pieces on my blog. Moments ago, I'd been dressed in a full-length organic cotton sundress, its laced bodice giving way to a floaty bias skirt, all in the softest shade of lemon. My shiny, deep auburn hair had been swept artfully to the side, softly teased curls contrasting with the colour of the fabric. The image on the screen now showed that there was absolutely nothing artful about my current look. The dress was plastered to my body, its pale colour and fine fabric meaning that it had helpfully gone completely see-through the moment it got wet. My hair had returned to its natural poker-straight state and clung in strands to the front of the dress and my upper arms. I peered at the screen again for direction, then reached up. A piece of seaweed had wound itself around my hair and was now clinging to the side of my head, just above my ear. Tentatively, exploring my hair with my fingers, I brushed against something slimy. Biting back a squeal, I tried again, forcing my hand to close on the slippery tail. I yanked and felt it give. Flinging the offending piece of seaweed back towards the waves, I turned back to Tilly. Has it all gone?" She peered around my head, moving me by the shoulder to check the back. "Yes, all gone." "Thanks for your help." I raised an eyebrow and grinned at her. She looked at me, a sheepish look on her face. "Sorry, seaweed gives me the willies. It's all slimy and yucky." I shook my head at her, still smiling. "What are we going to do about the dress?" Tilly asked. I glanced down. She was right. There was no way I could walk about like this. Brighton might be known for its laissez-faire attitude, but I personally drew the line at swanning about in an outfit that now left very little to the imagination. I leant across and took the bags and equipment off her. "New plan. I'll go and find us a more inconspicuous spot, and you nip across the road and grab us some coffees and something to eat. We can go over some stuff here until I dry out enough to not get arrested." "Sounds good." She turned to go. "And I'm sorry about the seaweed thing." "Don't worry about it," I said, handing her 2 reusable takeaway cups. "Now, off you go. I'll be over here." I waved the bags in the general direction of where I was headed. "Okay, back in a bit." I sat down and pulled a pair of flip-flops from one of the bags, slipping them on. I made my way across the pebbles to a spot that looked good and sat myself down. From one of the bags I pulled an Oriental-style parasol and opened it, shading my pale skin from the strengthening sun. Whilst my brother had inherited my dad's "one glance at the sun and I'm handsomely golden" genes, I'd inherited my mother's pale Irish colouring wholesale from the red hair to skin the colour of fresh cream. Golden wasn't a word I associated with my skin when it came to the sun. Red and blotchy would be nearer the truth if I ever bothered trying to acquire anything resembling a suntan, which I didn't. If I was honest, it didn't really bother me. Despite all the usual carrot top, ginger knob, and other wholly inaccurate connotations my redhead status had inspired at school, Mum had always kept me positive about it all. Of course, when all my friends had been wearing tiny shorts and crop tops, their golden tans making their hair look blonder, legs longer, and teeth whiter, there had been moments I'd ached to be the same. But as I got older, I realized that I couldn't change what I'd been given, so it would be better to embrace it rather than fight it. And in recent years, celebrity had been on our side, with Prince Harry and Ed Sheeran flying the flag for the men, plus the advent of the Mad Men phenomenon and actresses like Emma Stone and Julianne Moore. Redheads were cool. I mean, we'd always known we were cool, but finally, the world at large was also now getting the message. Chapter 2. I'd played on this aspect for my blog, Brighton Belle. I saw it as part of my USP. A lot of the blogs were run by gorgeous brunettes and beautiful blondes, and whilst a lot of beauty advice can be applied to everyone, I'd had quite a few emails from young redheads who were getting teased at school or just didn't know how to make the best of their fabulous colouring. Tilly and I shared the task of replying to emails and comments, but I always replied personally to these ones, because I knew exactly what these girls were going through, and I'd asked them to let me know how they got on, if they chose to take my advice. When replies did come back, with the sender clearly in a happier place, it always made me a little bit teary, and I'd send Mum a quick email, telling her about it. People sometimes accuse bloggers of being vain, and that it is all me, me, me. Some comments were downright nasty. The internet could be a wonderful thing, but it certainly had its dark side too, allowing people the opportunity to be incredibly unpleasant whilst hiding behind a shield of anonymity. The days when I got a response from a reader who had been made to feel better about herself by trying something I'd suggested helped wipe all the mean stuff away. It reiterated to me that my blog, which was now my full-time job, had a purpose, and a good one at that. Tilly returned with the drinks. "Sorry it took a while. There's some sort of conference on at the Brighton Centre, and everyone's stocking up on drinks before they go in." "Not to worry. Have a pew," I said, indicating the other side of the blanket I'd folded over several times to sit on. We sat back and watched the surf splash to shore. The beach was getting busier now, as tourists and locals on a day off came down to take advantage of the sun. The windsurfers from earlier were now further down the beach, pulling their boards on shore. At the end of the Palace Pier, the rides were beginning to move, and Tilly and I watched as the booster started to spin, the wire-enclosed pods on the end of its arms reaching out over the sea on every turn. "Have you ever been on that?" Tilly asked me, pointing at the ride with her takeaway cup. "No, you couldn't pay me enough." I turned and looked at her from under the shade of my umbrella. "Have you?" She nodded. "Sam made a big deal about wanting to go on it a couple of years ago, then promptly threw up all over the place, including me." "Oh, no!" I screwed my face up at the thought. "And this is the same Sam you're about to marry. I hope he realizes just exactly how much of a gem he's getting with you." "I remind him frequently, and he's banned from all rides now, at least if I'm in the vicinity." That sounds like a very good strategy. "How's the dress?" I looked down at the fabric of the skirt I'd spread out in the sun, my legs folded up and crossed out of the way underneath it. "Definitely drying. My bum still feels pretty soggy, though, which could be tricky. I'd rather not walk to the car with my knickers on display." I glanced at the bodice. Its double-layer construction had at least helped make this part a little less embarrassing now it was drying in the warm air. "The top will be okay, and I've got a scarf in here I can just sling round my hips to cover my unmentionables." Tilly laughed. "I don't think there'd be too many people complaining." "I'd be complaining. Come on, help me make sure I get everything under wraps." We got to our feet, and I rummaged in my bag for a scarf. Pulling it out, I tied it so that it sat low on my waist and covered my bum and the front of my dress, preventing anyone from seeing that today was, of course, the day I'd chosen to wear my tiniest pair of knickers. We gathered up our stuff and headed back up to the car. After loading the gear and ourselves in, I pointed the little Fiat back in the direction of the marina, and my flat. Leaving Tilly to upload the photos and do any editing required, I grabbed my dressing gown and headed into the bathroom. Stripping off the dress and my underwear, I stepped into the shower. With body and hair now free from sand and salt, I stepped out and began drying off. My eyes took in the small beach of sand in the bottom of the bath. Flicking the water back on, I rinsed it away. Not exactly the best start to the day. "How did they come out?" I said, returning to the living room after blasting my hair with the hairdryer. I'd got the worst off, but it was still damp, so I twisted it up and stuck a butterfly clip on the back to hold it out of the way. "Good," Tilly said, her eyes still locked on the screen. "It looks like we got some good shots before you took a dip, so we can just go ahead as planned. I think this is really going to be a great aspect to the blog, you know, incorporating more of the city into the shots." "I hope so. I'm thinking we might need a bit more practice with location photography, though." "Yeah, I think you're right. Sorry, I didn't get to warn you about that wave. I didn't really notice it coming until it was too late." "Don't worry, no harm." "What the hell is that?" My eyes fixed on the image now displaying on Tilly's laptop. "Oh, the camera was set on burst mode. It was still taking pictures when the whole wave thing happened. I guess it caught you as you stood up." Tilly giggled. "I'm pretty sure the hits on the blog would go sky high if I put this one up." On the screen was a picture of me standing at the edge of the beach, soaking wet, eyes closed, just as I'd pushed my hair back. The yellow dress was plastered against my body, leaving little to the imagination. My mind whizzed back to the windsurfer. Oh, God, please don't let him have seen anything. "The only thing you're going to do with that is to delete it. Now." "Oh, Libby, I never thought I'd say this, but you're no fun." I pulled a face at her. "Delete. Now." The post dropped through the door, and we turned at the sound. I heard Tilly pressing keys as I went to fetch it, my mind working as I did so. "Although we could do a sort of mini feature about the mishap, not with that picture though." I flicked through the mail. Nothing interesting. "Have you still got the one you took with the seaweed in my hair?" "Yes, here." Tilly brought it up on screen. Certainly not the most flattering shot, but if I crop the X-rated bit off, it might make a funny little story as an extra post. I'll set about writing that up, if you can finish off the main one. "No problem." As we'd started early in order to catch the light and the relative peace of the beach, I'd offered to let Tilly have the afternoon off. Once she'd gone, I was going to settle in and try to get my head around the tax paperwork. Again. A couple of days ago, I'd rung an accountant, but within minutes he was talking in what seemed like an entirely foreign language, asking me things I didn't understand. Eventually, I'd feigned someone at the door and hung up before proceeding to work myself up into even more of a state about the whole thing. But today was a new day. If I could make even a little progress, it would go some way to making up for being washed up on shore this morning. "You're going to love me," Amy announced as I answered my phone. "I already love you," I laughed. "Well, obviously, I am fabulous, totally understandable, but what I mean is you're going to love me even more." "Not possible, but tell me anyway." "I am going to help prevent you going to prison." She paused for a moment. "Really? Some people are so judgmental. You should have seen some of the looks I just got." Her voice faded a little as she turned away from the handset. "It's all right. It's only the one body," she called to her colleagues. I grinned, imagining Amy now doing the same. Most definitely not the shy type. If she could get a reaction out of someone with a bit of harmless fun, she was having a good day. Her corporate career was going well, but her latest position had also landed her in an office with some people best described as a little stuffy. So, why the love fest? Because, dear heart, I was chatting to Marcus in the staff kitchen today. Is this Marcus that has been asking you out forever, Marcus? I interrupted. The very same. I made a interesting noise. Amy ignored me and continued. He was asking what I'd been up to lately, and I mentioned that, among other things, I had been drinking wine as a sign of camaraderie with my best friend who was stressing over having to do her first-year business accounts. Camaraderie? I believe the wine was your suggestion. Semantics. Anyway, the upshot is that Marcus's brother, Charlie, is some sort of risk manager in London, but lives down here. Right, I said, not entirely following. But he started off as an accountant before moving into risk management. Amy clarified. Oh. Marcus already had a chat with him, and Charlie's agreed to pop round next weekend and take a look at your books. What? Here? Aren't I supposed to make an appointment or something? Yes, there. It's a favour to his brother. He was hoping to be able to do it this weekend, but he's about to jet off to New York or somewhere equally glitzy for work. Nice. Quite. We both reflected for a moment on the glamour of jetting around the world on business before I pulled myself back to the subject at hand. Oh, Amy, I'm not sure. Too late, it's arranged. And poor Marcus would be crushed if it fell apart now. I paused. Amy? Yes? Why is Marcus pulling in favours for you? Seriously, you're finally going on a date with him? She lowered her voice. It wasn't that I was averse to him before. I just had to make sure I was over the whole John thing. Marcus is too nice to be used as rebound fodder. But are you sure? I suddenly realised that despite being alone in my flat, I had also lowered my voice. I shook my head and returned to normal volume. I mean, please don't feel you have to do this to help me out. I'm sure there are plenty of other accountants I can try. Don't get into something you don't want. Libs, it's fine. I do want. And he's taking me up to Nobu in London, so I definitely want. Also, this way, I know that you'll be getting good advice. You've worked too hard not to have the best people helping you when you need them. You know, you are right. I do love you more. See, I told you. It's just inevitable. When are you going out with Marcus? Tomorrow night. We're catching the train up to town after work. Know something? What's that? I can't wait. After months of putting him off, I'm actually really excited to see how this goes. I hope it goes brilliantly, Ames. Text me after, won't you? Will do. And Charlie said he'll be round about 10:30 next Saturday morning. Is that okay? Of course. Thanks for setting this up, Amy. And thank Marcus, too. I really appreciate it. Least I could do. Okay, got to go. Talk to you later. And she was gone. I put my phone to the side of my workstation and allowed a small wave of relief to wash over me. Although I'd earlier decided on having another attempt at looking into the accountants, I'd procrastinated about it for most of the day. Now, thanks to Amy, there was something actually happening. At last. I smiled and let the worries of finance get pushed to the back of my mind for the first time in ages. Opening a new email, I entered a familiar address and quickly typed an update of the situation. Hi, Mum. Looks like I might be able to finally stop worrying about all this tax stuff. Got a chap coming round next weekend to take a look. Very relieved. Love you. Kiss, kiss, kiss. Picking up a pile of notes from the side of my computer, I spread them out on the glass top of my desk and grabbed a pencil from the outsized Visit Chicago mug my brother had brought me back from a medical conference. Is it for holding a beverage or for swimming in? I'd asked. I believe they're marketed as multi-purpose. So it now sat as a handy holder for all my pens, pencils, and other implements I might need close to hand whilst working, which was preferable to spraining a wrist whilst trying to use it for its primary purpose. Pushing my chair away from the desk, I went over to where I'd set up my camera and the ring light I used for my YouTube channel videos. I checked the battery level on the camera. Fully charged. During my early days of doing them, I'd once forgotten to charge it and discovered that it had switched off halfway through a makeup tutorial, resulting in me having to redo the entire thing from scratch. Sitting in front of a camera, recording videos that would then be sent out into the great unknown, hadn't come especially easy to me. Although I loved what I did, and loved sharing it with people, I had initially been entirely satisfied doing all of that via the blog. Taking photos of myself with certain makeup looks or wearing an outfit I'd put together had just grown organically. I'd always been looking to improve the blog, even when it had been just a hobby. So I'd worked on relaxing in front of a camera. After reading somewhere that the key was just getting comfortable with it all, and the secret to it was just practice, that was what I'd done. I'd practiced, just snapping and deleting for ages until it had finally stopped feeling quite so awkward. The video side of the blog was something I'd really had to consider. I hadn't been worried about the haters or the oddballs or anything like that. It just hadn't seemed to me at the time that it was a direction I'd needed to go in. It had been clear that it was a popular avenue for many, with some blogs getting an incredible number of hits and their owners becoming recognized as celebrities. I was happy for those bloggers. This was their main thing, and what they wanted to do with their life. So publicizing it as much as possible and building a brand made sense. But when I'd first started the blog, it hadn't been my main thing. I'd been a PA, and I'd liked my job. The blog had just been something I'd enjoyed doing in my spare time, my hobby. I loved it when I got comments, and always made a point of replying to them. I knew that for however many views a blog got, hardly any of those translated into a comment. It was hard when there were so many things vying for attention. I was guilty of it myself in many cases, so I really appreciated that those people had taken time to leave a comment on the blog. Gradually, I'd started getting more and more requests to do videos to show in real time how I'd created certain looks to help readers recreate them at home. I'd talked it over with Amy, who had been all for it. Amy loved clothes and makeup as much as I did. We had pretty different looks. I tended to fall more into the boho camp, while she was definitely more classic. But our differences in taste only strengthened our friendship, and she'd been behind me from the start when I'd done my first video. I'd recorded it and then spent hours editing, learning the software, mostly through trial and error. A lot of error, as I'd gone along. Once finished, I'd shown it to Amy for her feedback. I knew she loved me enough not to tell me it was great if it wasn't, and risking me looking an idiot online. The next day, Amy had called round to my flat, wearing the same makeup look as I'd done in my video. Exactly the same. "I followed it step by step," she'd said. "I love it. You were brilliant. You absolutely have to post this and do more." Her positivity and support had been the boost I'd needed. I'd pressed the button to upload my first ever video, all the while feeling just a teensy bit sick. The response was amazing. My blog hits went up. The link had been shared, and I'd started getting a bunch of thumbs up on the YouTube channel. By the time I'd done my second one, I'd relaxed a bit more in front of the camera, and the views had gone up again. I couldn't help but get excited by the enthusiasm filtering through to me via the blog. I'd had an email from one of my viewers saying that she had used my tutorial for her prom and it had sent her confidence soaring. In her own words, she had felt like the belle of the ball. I'd actually cried when I'd read that. Perhaps to some it was a frivolous pastime, a grown woman playing with clothes and makeup and sharing lifestyle tips. Who was I that people should listen to me? And I got that. I really did. I could understand how all of this might come across as a vanity project to those who didn't understand what it meant to me to share these things, or what it meant to those women out there to gain that extra bit of confidence by discovering something new. Whenever I got a negative comment, or a dismissive sound was made in my hearing by someone who found out what I now did for a living, I searched in my mind for that happy email, and others like it, mentally reading it over. If I helped just one person feel better about themselves, then that was all I needed. Flipping on the studio ring light and checking the camera's settings, I took a seat opposite them. I pressed a button on the remote control and saw a red light on the camera begin to blink. "Hi everyone, Libby here, and welcome to another video. Today I've got some fabulous products to show you and how they can be used to create a great summery look. Even better, these are all from a new range called You Can Be Natural, which is a small startup company committed to using fair trade, fully natural, non-GM ingredients. You know I'm all about the natural and ethical when possible, so I'm pretty excited to try these out. But don't worry, you don't have to have these particular items to get this look. And I'll be chatting about plenty of other ways to adapt it to suit whatever you have in your own makeup bag. So, first off. Chapter 3. The following day, I was just in the middle of editing the completed video when my doorbell rang. Glancing down at the clock in the corner of my computer's screen, I guessed my assistant Tilly was finally done with tasting wedding cake. I got up and went over to answer the door. "Hi, I'm so sorry I'm later than—" She stopped, half in and half out of the doorway, and stared at me. I shifted my eyes. I'd opted for a slice of chocolate cake for elevensies. It needed eating, and was just beginning to wonder if I should have checked my chocolate-to-face ratio before opening the door. "What?" I asked, when Tilly still said nothing. "That's it," she replied. "What's it?" "That look. The one you're wearing. Is that for a video?" Yes, I shot one for it yesterday. Are you actually coming in? Oh, right, yes. Tilly stepped inside and pushed the door closed as she slipped off her heels and the lightweight jacket she'd had on over her sundress. It was warming up out there now that the clouds were clearing, but there was a definite breeze whipping in off the sea. "Tea?" I called, heading off to the kitchen. "Please," she replied, before following me through. "So, did you just come up with this look yesterday?" Tilly had come closer and was now peering at me. "Could you look at it on the video? I've captured a couple of stills for the blog too. It's just, and don't take this the wrong way, you're freaking me out." "Oh, sorry, of course." Tilly stepped back. "It's only that I've been through so many magazines, videos, and goodness knows what else trying to find the right look for the wedding. I was beginning to think I'd never find the right one, and then there it is." She started smiling. "Although I might leave off the chocolate cake crumbs. It needed eating, of course. Talking of which, how did your own cake tasting go?" "Good, apart from the fact I might not want to eat another piece of cake again for several months. I think we finally settled on one. It was actually the first one we thought we'd go for, but Sam wanted to make sure. You know how it is." "You mean he was hungry?" "Exactly." Tilly rolled her eyes. Tilly's fiancé, Sam, was always hungry. It led us to wonder where he put it all, as he was skinny as a beanpole, but the amount of food he could consume was staggering. "Come on, I'll print off those stills for your wedding file, and then we can get on with some tasks. The most amazing box of goodies arrived this morning. I haven't had a chance to look through them properly, so thought we could go through together and plan out some posts around them. If you choose which things you'd prefer to try, then I'll take what's left. Although, from what I've seen, they all look delicious." "Ooh, show me, show me." We took our tea and headed back into the living room to get to work. At precisely 10:30 the following Saturday morning, the doorbell rang, and I opened my front door to find the light almost entirely blocked out by a very tall, slightly serious-looking, but entirely gorgeous man. He wore smart, dark-wash jeans, a slim-fit, short-sleeve shirt that only half hid some serious guns, and a Messenger hybrid laptop bag hung from a strap slung across his broad chest. His dark blonde hair was short and neat, and a cleanly shaven, lightly tanned face highlighted the most strikingly blue eyes I had ever seen. "Hi," I smiled. It was kind of hard not to. "Hello," he half smiled, and shifted his weight. "I'm looking for Libby Cartwright." "That's me." I paused, momentarily. "Are you Charlie?" He nodded, as though relieved to have me confirm his identity. "I am." "Nice to meet you." I held out my hand, and he shook it firmly. "Please, come in." I stood back to let his sizable bulk through the doorway, the top of his head missing the frame by barely an inch, then closed the door behind him. "Thanks so much for doing this," I said, turning to him. He gave a little shake of his head. "Not much choice in the matter. My brother's got the real hots for some girl in his office. I was roped in to do this so that he could get her to go out with him." "Yeah," I said slowly. "That girl is my best friend." A brief flash of awkward horror showed in Charlie's eyes. "Oh!" "Look," I said gently, I realise that you've been forced into doing this. I'm absolutely sure that you have much better ways to spend your Saturday morning than doing boring paperwork for someone you don't even know. So why don't we sort something out that suits everyone better? Or perhaps there's someone you could recommend to me, whom you trust? Charlie was looking at me now, but hadn't replied. I tilted my head to prompt him. He took a deep breath and gave me a tight smile. I didn't mean for that to sound bad about your friend. Look, would you mind if I went out and came in again and we started from scratch? I wasn't entirely sure he was joking. It's fine. I smiled at him, and he seemed to relax a little. Are you really sure you're happy to do this? It's obviously out of hours, so perhaps you could give me a rough idea of what your hourly rate is, just so that I don't pass out when you hand me your bill. I gave a little laugh to show him that I wasn't serious, although I sort of was. Charlie looked at me, a slightly confused expression on his face. There is no charge. Like I said, it's a favour for my little brother. Now it was my turn to look horrified. Oh, no, I can't possibly let you do that. Giving up part of your weekend to go over a stranger's accounts for free. It's just not right. Really, I don't mind. I know it might seem boring to you, but it's sort of fun for me. It's different from what I do in my everyday job now, so it's quite nice to get back to basics. He caught my look, and a shy smile spread over his face. The gorgeous-o-meter dinged up another few notches. I smiled back, automatically. I guess that sounds pretty sad to you, right? That I find accounting fun? He shrugged his broad shoulders. No, I answered quickly. Really, it doesn't. And honestly, I'm so thankful for you and your love of figures right now, because I have absolutely no idea where to start. As I steered the conversation into an area Charlie was more familiar with, he seemed to visibly relax. Would you like a tea or coffee before we get started? Coffee would be great, thank you. Come on through, I called, as I headed off to the kitchen to get the drinks on the go. I indicated for Charlie to take a seat as I gathered cups and supplies. He did so, but within a moment he was back up again, wandering over to the window to look across the harbour. I came up behind him with the drinks. Do you want to sit outside for a few minutes whilst we have these? There's a better view there. Sounds great. It'll give a few minutes to let the caffeine get to work. He gave a little chuckle. Add cute to the list. I led the way to the balcony door and opened it. It's a bit of a squeeze, but quite manageable, I said, before realising that Charlie was substantially bigger than most people who sat out here with me. I led the way and took a seat on the farthest chair, sitting in a cross-legged position. Charlie followed and folded his frame into the other one. I let out a giggle. Sorry, I know it's not the most practical. They really didn't look that big at the garden centre. It's fine. Cosy. How long have you lived here? Charlie asked, after a few minutes, as he rearranged his legs. Oh, quite a few years now, I replied. I managed to get in before the prices tipped into insane territory, luckily. I watched him subtly, trying to get comfortable for a couple more moments, as he nodded in response. Here, I said. Put your feet on the end of my chair. Oh, no, thanks. Anyway, I'm okay. I let out a laugh. You are so not okay. Just put your feet on the end. I'm not using that bit anyway. He straightened his long legs out until his feet rested on the end of the other lounger. Better?
Better, he agreed. Do you like it here?
I do. It's far enough away from the centre, but also easy to get there when I want to. And I love watching the boats and the water. I think I must have been a sailor in a previous life. Or a fish. I saw an amused look cross Charlie's face.
And do you live here on your own?
I slid a glance to him and did my best to hide the smile that was itching to escape. But I needn't have bothered, because Charlie got there before me.
Oh, I didn't mean... That sounded like I was trying to... It was just...
It's fine, Charlie. Don't worry. I waved my hand. I know you were just making conversation. He did a tiny headshake to himself and took a sip of the coffee before giving me a smile that did a good job of mixing embarrassment and shyness.
I'm sorry, I'm not very good at small talk. Luckily, Marcus and my best mate, Alex, are connoisseurs at it. They usually help cover any failings on my part when we go out.
You shouldn't think of them as failings. It's just that everyone has different skills, and that's good. It makes the world a more interesting place.
You don't think being unable to talk to a potential client without it sounding like I'm trying to chat her up is a failing?
No, I don't. I think you were just making conversation, which you've admitted isn't your specialty, and the fact that you still made the effort does you a vast credit. Charlie tilted his head at me, the vague shadow of a smile in those incredible eyes.
Are you always like this?
Like what?
Finding a positive spin for things?
I do like to try. But between you and me, even I'm finding it hard to find something, anything positive with this tax stuff. I can't tell you how relieved I was when Amy told me you were coming to save the day. Why does the tax office make it so difficult? He shrugged. I pulled a face and laughed. That's a polite way of saying that it doesn't seem all that difficult to you.
No, not at all. It's just, well, like you said, people have different skill sets. Mine happens to be numbers.
Lucky for me. Do you want to go in and start taking a look?
Sounds good.
I let Charlie maneuver himself out of the chair and step back through the door. I unfolded my legs and followed him. Maybe 2 large loungers really were too much out there, I thought, glancing at them again as I reached for the door handle to balance myself. What I found instead was a very muscular arm. I looked up as Charlie took my hand with his and steadied me in through the door.
You know, whilst it is cozy, I'm a little worried it's also an accident waiting to happen, he said, glancing back at the balcony.
Is that your official risk management opinion? I grinned up at him, tilting my head back to meet his gaze, which was serious.
It is. People pay a lot of money for that normally.
Humour suddenly sparkled in the spectacularly blue eyes. Do you take cheques, or would you prefer cash? You know, avoid the taxman and all that. The humour spread from his eyes and enveloped his whole face. It had quite the effect, and I was suddenly glad of the cooling breeze drifting through the flat from the open window.
Come on. Let's go and see how we can get you paying as little as possible to him, legally.
Legally sounds good. I've been lying on this very floor, surrounded by paperwork, convinced I was going to end up going to prison for messing everything up and accidentally committing fraud. He laughed. It was a nice sound, and I was relieved that he seemed to have relaxed a little.
You really have got yourself in a state over this, haven't you?
I pulled a face.
Don't worry. I'm rubbish at small talk, but I'm good at this, I promise. It's all going to be fine.
Nearly 3 hours later, and I was beginning to understand a lot more about tax than I'd ever thought I would, or could. Charlie was patient and kind, and didn't treat me like an idiot if I needed something explaining more than once. He was also funny. Now that he was in his comfort zone, it seemed as if his natural personality had stepped to the fore. It made me a little sad that he didn't feel as though he could harness that in everyday social situations, because, seriously, women would be falling over themselves for him. Not that they wouldn't be already, but add this side of his personality and, hello, Charlie Richmond was, in fact, incredibly sexy. And he seemed to have absolutely no idea of the fact. A thought suddenly skittered through my brain. Should I be worried that I had 6 feet 5 inches worth of gorgeousness sitting next to me, and all I could think about was getting my tax stuff in order?
Did I say something funny?
He asked, the faint ghost of a smile playing on his mouth. No, I returned, quickly deciding that telling Charlie what I was really thinking was probably a little too much sharing, even for me, on a first encounter. I had a feeling I wouldn't see him for dust if he knew my current thoughts. And I really needed my taxes done. I'm just happy that you were able to do this today for me.
Like I said, it's a pleasure. There's a few more things to go through, but I can always come back another day or meet up somewhere another time if you've had enough.
How about we take a break for a bit of lunch and then see how we feel after that? Unless you have other plans, of course, I added, hastily.
No, not at all. Lunch sounds great.
Do you have any preferences? Favorite places or foods?
No, I pretty much eat anything.
Okay, let me grab my stuff and we can go. Here, put some of that on whilst you're waiting. It's scorching out there. I tossed him a tube of sunscreen I'd been sent for reviewing earlier in the week. He turned it over in his hands, read the blurb, and began unscrewing the top. I slung my bag over my shoulder and grabbed my wide-brimmed hat. There was only a light breeze out there today, so I was fairly confident that I wasn't going to end up chasing it halfway down the beach. Again. Ready? I asked.
Yep,
Charlie said, replacing the sun cream tube on the console table and turning to me with one hand on the front door catch. Oh, wait, you have some... Automatically, I reached up and gently rubbed in the blob of sun cream he'd missed on the top of his cheekbone with my thumb. There.
Thanks,
he nodded, not quite looking at me. I blinked once, slowly. Sorry, I probably should have just pointed you to a mirror then, shouldn't I? Habit. I have 2 nephews, so I'm always tidying them up. Obviously they're, a bit smaller than you. That should have given me a clue, I guess.
It's all right. Thanks for tidying me up too.
Charlie gave a little smile, and I returned it, all the while thinking that I most definitely needed to work on my boundary issues. I'd always been super tactile and was, as I'd said, used to fussing after my nephews. It was only when I'd looked up and seen Charlie's diverted eyes that I'd suddenly remembered not everyone was as touchy-feely as me. Chapter 4. We left the flat and headed down to the pathway that separated the residential buildings from the marina walls. On our left, the sun was glinting off the calm water that today had taken on a vibrant aquamarine hue. "Look at that colour!" I enthused.
"Beautiful, isn't it?"
"So you live in Brighton too?" Amy was saying.
"That's right, just along the front, on the way back into town from here."
We walked on another few steps before Charlie spoke again.
"Amy is the girl my brother has been nuts about for ages?"
I looked at him from under my hat. "Nuts about?"
"Completely. I was so relieved that she finally said yes. For him and me." He chuckled. "Can I ask something, though?"
His voice was a little more serious now. "Of course."
"Why did she make him wait so long? I mean, look, I know she's your friend, but he's my little brother. And yes, he's big enough and ugly enough to look after himself, but I just don't want someone playing games with him. Especially not someone whom he really seems to like. I know you're obviously going to side with your friend, which is totally understandable, but I get the impression you tend to say what you think, honestly."
"I do. You're right. But I can put your mind at rest. The whole reason Amy's made him wait so long, as you put it, is precisely because she didn't want to muck him around. Because she likes and respects Marcus too much to do that." Charlie seemed to consider that, then nodded, as if in acceptance of my answer. We were now walking along the raised wooden boardwalk that faced the marina. Restaurants lined the back edge, and outdoor tables were nearly all full with locals and holidaymakers enjoying the weekend sunshine.
"Would you rather sit inside?"
Charlie asked, having apparently already assessed that I wasn't the type for sitting in the sun. "Do you mind?"
"Not at all. It's pretty busy out here anyway. It might be a bit less manic in there."
We headed inside the restaurant and found that Charlie was right. Most of the clientele had chosen to sit outside in the heat rather than enjoy the cool of the air conditioning whilst they ate. The waiter showed us to a table, and we gave ourselves a few moments to settle in before I took up the conversation again. "Amy had a bit of a messy breakup some time ago. She was reluctant to see anybody for a long time because she was worried about rebounding. She had to say yes to Marcus when the time was right."
"And what if he'd stopped asking by then? Given up?"
Charlie asked, his eyes serious. From anyone else, I'd have taken this to be a bit of a smart-ass comment. But not here. My time spent with him this morning had quickly shown me that. This was just Charlie Richmond's logical mind wanting to see how things worked. Then I guess it would have shown that he wasn't as nuts about her as you thought, and that it wasn't meant to be. He fiddled with the menu, considering my words.
"You really believe in all that fate and meant-to-be stuff?"
"I'm guessing that you don't." Charlie let out a sigh.
"I'm not really sure that I can. I think that's the logical side of my brain kicking in, why I like numbers and why I'm good at my job. Fate doesn't play a part in it. It's all about probabilities. It can all be worked out in black and white."
"But life isn't black and white. Even you must admit that."
"I do. And maybe that's why I want as much as possible of it to be logical, because sometimes there's something that comes out of nowhere that throws you for a loop. For someone like me who needs... He paused and rephrased. Who likes to find reason behind things. Something like that just completely fries my brain. It's almost impossible to process. I got the feeling that Charlie had a specific situation in mind. His eyes had taken on a sadness. I knew that it was too early to start questioning him as to what it was. That was to say, I knew it. I just couldn't help it. Something specifically threw you for a loop. It was a statement rather than a question. Charlie pulled his gaze from the menu. I'm sorry, I have no control sometimes. Feel free to tell me to shut up. His lips quirked. That's okay. I know exactly where I stand with you. I like that. I smiled, feeling the same way. His eyes scanned the menu again. I guessed he wasn't actually going to answer me, but was, not surprisingly, too polite to tell me to keep my beak out. In my second year of university, my best mate there collapsed and died on the running track. Fit as anything, he was. And then, out like a light. He hadn't looked up. Oh, Charlie, I'm so sorry. My hand automatically moved to touch his. Again with the touchy-feely boundary issues. Oh well. But he didn't move it. He just looked up and let out a sigh. Something called HCM, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Funny what you remember, isn't it? Apparently it generally affects younger people, and most of the time, unless it's something flagged in your family history, you don't know you have it until something happens. I didn't know what to say. He reached for the glass of water the waiter had put down moments after we'd arrived, and took a sip. Were you with him? He nodded. Right beside him, and I couldn't do anything. I've never felt so utterly useless in my entire life. It sounds like there's nothing that anyone could have done. Charlie shook his head, then looked at me under his lashes. Do you always do this? My eyes widened. What? Put people at their ease so they spill out their deepest, darkest secrets. I got the feeling Charlie Richmond wasn't used to opening up too often, and I didn't want to ruin the meal or, let's face it, lose my newly acquired accountant. Time to lighten the mood. The lifestyle blog thing is just a cover. Truth is, I'm actually a kick-ass secret agent. Being interested in people is my weapon of choice. Everything else makes far too much mess. The blue eyes sparkled with amusement. I'm sorry if I overstepped. I sort of have a habit of doing that. He waved away my apology before taking another sip of water. It just seemed such a waste. As I said, I like to try and reason things out, but there was no reason for it. It was just completely out of nowhere. Sadness clouded the blue. It was an utter waste. I'm so sorry about your friend. He flicked his gaze to me and gave an almost imperceptible nod of acceptance. I continued. It would be so nice if life worked like that there really was a reason for everything. Unfortunately, it doesn't, and there isn't. It's just bloody messy a lot of the time. I think all we can ever do is muddle through the best way we know how.
Whether that's by your way of finding as much black and white, linear movement as possible, or my more wishy-washy method. His face creased into a smile as he brought his gaze back from the middle distance it had been resting in. Wishy-washy. Looking back at him, I was relieved to see the sadness dissipated. It's as good a description as any, I said, laughing, as the waiter approached the table. It is, Charlie agreed. We ordered our drinks and set about scanning the menu for lunch. What shall I have? I pondered aloud, my gaze drifting from one yummy-sounding choice to another on the oversized menu I now held in front of me. Do you want bread and olives, or something else to get started on? I said, peeking over the top of the card. I just wondered if you wanted some bread and olives to be getting on with, whilst we wait for the rest. He paused. Or do you not like them? I love them. I just have a habit of filling up on them before my main course arrives. I can ration you. Once again, I couldn't tell if he was joking or not. I decided to roll with it anyway. Okay, deal. I caught the tiniest of twinkles in his eyes at my response. The waiter appeared at our table once again, a short while later. Are you ready to order? He asked, or do you need a little more time? Unlike Charlie, I'd noticed that this particular waiter's gaze had rarely left us since we'd come in, or more specifically, had barely left my lunch companion. I was pretty sure he'd be happy for this gorgeous man to sit there all day. Charlie looked at me for an answer, and I nodded. We gave our choices, and the waiter scribbled them down before taking the menus with a flourish. He threw Charlie an extra-wide smile as he handed his over. Charlie smiled back at him in thanks, the further connotations of the waiter's attention apparently lost on him. A few minutes later, the man was back with our drinks. He threw Charlie another couple of flirty looks, which again seemed to go unnoticed, then told us that our bread would be over in just a moment. I think you have an admirer, I said, when the waiter was out of earshot. Charlie's brow creased in question as he lifted his beer. It suddenly occurred to me that I had no idea as to whether Charlie was straight or gay. Either way, one gender was going to be sorely disappointed. The waiter, he's extremely enamored with you. Charlie raised one eyebrow at me as he took another sip. I just wanted to say, if you want to, follow up on that, please don't stand on ceremony on my behalf. I mean, go for it. Charlie's eyes bulged as he began choking on his drink. Turning redder as he tried to stifle the coughing, he buried his face in a napkin and endeavoured to do it quietly. Are you all right? I asked, even though he clearly wasn't. He didn't answer. Shall I pat you on the back or something? Would that help? I made to push my chair back and stand, but Charlie's waved hand kept me where I was. I'm fine, he croaked out, sounding anything but. Just went down the wrong way. He took another sip, and it seemed to help. His face, thankfully, began returning to a more normal colour. Better? I asked, concern in my voice. He smiled at me. Much. Thanks. The waiter appeared and placed our starter nibbles down, along with a couple of fresh napkins. Apparently, he'd also witnessed Charlie's mishap. Thanks. Charlie nodded at him. You're very welcome. I bent my head further as I took a breadstick and dunked it in the garlic dip we'd ordered. From my peripheral vision, I saw the waiter leave and head back to the bar. I risked a look up, my gaze quickly meeting Charlie's amused one.
Okay, I'll give you that one, but, and I don't know what you've heard, just so that you're clear, not that it matters on any level, but purely because trying to be politely quiet whilst choking is a complete pain in the arse, I'm not gay. So thanks for the offer of being a wingman or woman, but it's not necessary in this case.
Oh, right. Thought I'd ask, just in case, I said, selecting another breadstick whilst deftly managing to avoid looking at my companion. Truth be told, I suddenly felt like a bit of an idiot.
And please, don't think I don't appreciate the thought.
I could hear the smile in his voice. I risked a look. Yep, I knew it. There was a bloody great grin on his face. I gave a small eye roll. You see, this is why I work behind a screen. There's far less danger of me saying or doing something on the spur of the